Hello everyone and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host Matthew Head, and in this episode I'm talking to Armelle McGeachie. She is the founder of Girls with Dyslexia, which is an account to help women embrace their dyslexia. She does some great infographics which she posts on LinkedIn and Instagram, and also has a following on TikTok. She's a freelance marketer and focuses on writing and social media management, specializing in marketing, business and tech blogs. She graduated from the University of Loughborough with a degree in international business and has worked in business development and marketing before going out on her own freelance. As always, I'll put links to Girls with Dyslexia and other things we talk about, which will be available in the show notes, which are at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Armelle.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem at all. Where I wanted to kick this conversation off was I was digging through your background and profile and found that you did a bit of fundraising for your university during your final semester there. Now, my memory of final semester at university was that I was mega busy with trying to finish dissertation and I had no time to do anything like fundraising.
Yeah, I mean, final year for me was a very funny one.
Okay.
Up until that point, I was not doing well academically. I was getting by, the university hadn't kicked me out at this point. So I was getting by.
Surviving, right.
Yeah, and I always knew that I was dyslexic, and I thought, okay, now's the time to really get a diagnosis, because I didn't know about funding. I thought the uni would be able to fund it, which they ultimately did. So I managed to get in and get a diagnosis kind of midway through first semester. But once I got that and I got the support, not only did my grades go up, but I just felt this sense of relief, like I had so much more free time, which is very strange. It felt very, very strange.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be able to kind of spread myself thin and do the things that I wouldn't have been able to do previously, because I was just locked up in my room studying, which actually didn't result in anything.
Oh, I see. So, well, that's really interesting, isn't it? So I did read, 21, you got statement of dyslexia, which would have been your final year at university. And all the individuals kicked in. You're like, hey, this is a lot easier. So you think, well, I'll just go fundraising and do all this other crazy stuff. Did you?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Would you have been out in the student union and all kind of fun things like that? Or was it not quite that crazy?
When you're looking at first and second year, definitely. But no, when you're looking at final year, like nights out reduced. But they actually crept back up after I got the diagnosis. And I think going out was definitely, I was part of the masses. I was part of that university culture a lot more, where you could, I mean, I'm not prescribing, any sort of work-life balance like the one at uni, but I was definitely able to balance a lot more than I originally could. Yes.
So you mentioned that you got the feeling you were dyslexic, but you hadn't really got round to pushing people to get you diagnosed with it. Where did them feelings come from? Can you remember how far back that started?
Yeah, every time I tell the story, people just think I'm making this up. Because I weirdly can remember from a really young age. And the first time that I really felt, I guess in quotes, different was way back in year 5. So I remember being really good at spelling up until that point. So year 4, I think, was my year. Best year ever in terms of school. And then my first yeah, exactly. Like, you'd have a spelling test every day where you have to get 10 out of 10 basically. And I always really loved it, and I was good at it, but I really loved it as well. As soon as I went into year 5, I was just so confused. I think it was just the new environment, the new expectations. But that came with being a year 5 student, and I just completely plummeted. And I don't know why. And I think, and I always caveat it by saying, that I always had dyslexia, but that was the moment that I realized I was falling behind.
Okay. Yeah.
In terms of everyone was kind of progressing and I just wasn't progressing. So kind of education kind of stepped up a notch, but my kind of my comprehension and my understanding and my spelling just didn't. So that's when it clicked for me. But it wasn't until GCSE time when kind of you have the discussions about whether you're going to take, first of all, what GCSEs you're going to take, yes. Whether or not you take hires. Yeah, and you can, I don't know the official term, but you have higher GCSEs. So the maximum you can get was, when I was doing GCSEs was an A star.
Oh, yes.
And then you have like standards. I believe they're called standards, or I really can't remember. What they're called. But
I'll have to get out and link it in the show notes.
Yeah, and it was, you take an exam and the maximum that you could get was a C. Mm-hmm. So it was an easier one. And all my teachers in pretty much all the subjects were trying to get me to do all of these kind of lower standard exams where I could get maximum C, because they go, okay, Armelle, you're predicted all sort of U's at GCSE. You're not really going to get much higher than a C, so you may as well just do the easier exams. In my mind, because I wasn't diagnosed, I thought, hang on, no, I'm not. I can do this. I can, and I just flipped the switch, and I kind of ramped up my revision, and I kind of made a conscious effort to look at the gaps that I had. And it's just in that research into myself, I really figured out that my brain worked differently, but I didn't know why. I mean, I was 15, 16. I didn't know why it worked differently. I didn't really know what dyslexia was, to be honest. I still thought it was, reading and writing solely.
So I assume you're quite good at reading and writing, if that was kind of your assumption. You're like, well, I don't do that.
Well, no, I was awful. I was absolutely awful. And I thought, okay, I'm really bad at reading and writing, but I never sort of equated it, because I always kind of put the root cause down to it being me. So, whether I wasn't applying myself, I just, it's my fault that I couldn't really adjust myself to what the teachers were saying. And there was an element of hopelessness, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. So did you then take all the higher GCSEs and get a good grade out of them, just to tie that story up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I only did 8 GCSEs, 6 of which were Bs.
Right, okay.
Yeah, six of which were Bs. 1 was a C, and then the other was an A star. So I got no Cs. Well, 1 C. I got 1 C.
Yeah. That's annoying, because if it's the same when I did GCSEs, there was like a bracket, wasn't there? You go A star, but will only go down to a C, and then the other ones were lower. But they'd have artificially capped your grades if you'd taken their advice and gone for the lower section, which clearly you were capable of getting higher grades, which then affects you through college and university. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of drummed into me from an early age to go to university, and to go to university, I obviously needed A levels or a form of A levels. So I thought, okay, I really can't mess up my GCSEs. And at that point, I kind of switched, and I thought, whatever is challenging me, I need to figure out what it is. And then do something about it. And I didn't quite figure out what it was, because I wasn't obviously diagnosed until I was 21. But I learned how to work with whatever was holding me back.
So what sort of tricks did you deploy at that point in time to help you work with it? Was there a particular favourite tactic you'd got into?
Well, it seems ridiculous now, but I would always shy away from the aspects of revision and research and learning at school that I really didn't understand. I just kind of gave up a bit. But my tactic was to, instead of focusing on the nice stuff that I already understood, flip it and then work on the things that I really didn't understand. And it seems really, really simple now, kind of looking back. But then when you're in that school environment and you've got all of this information to really look at, and you've got to revise it. You're going to focus on the things that you sort of already know because you think it's going to be a little bit easier just to revise. So I kind of flipped it and looked at what I needed to research and revise. But also I discovered mind maps. I found out that, having an array of different coloured fine liners really helped. I would make a mind map per... I would separate my subjects into different topics, and then under the topics, I'd separate it into different kind of thought bubbles. And then I create a mind map for each and then stick it onto my wall. And every night before bed, I would stand up on my bed because that's how high the notes went. And I would just try to memorize it. And I memorized the patterns and the colors of things. So I didn't actually memorize the information, but I memorized the kind of patterns of the words and where they were on the page. And then I decipher what it says in the exam.
Yes. So you got like a memory map of the wall, and your brain goes, "Oh, it's that," and then you can pull it back in. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all very strange. And when I look back at it now, I think, okay, they are all the different recommendations that people give to students with dyslexia. You know, the colours, the mind maps, the memorization, have it on your wall so it's out there. Yes. But I just didn't really realise that at the time.
No. You were actually using quite a good dyslexic strength of all the visual skills to remember the subjects. Yeah. I can imagine your mind in the exam is sat there and you just go half close your eyes and your wall's in front of you and you're like, it's there, it's the green one. This is this. So that's really interesting. So clearly you were doing all the kind of correct strategies for somebody with dyslexia, but unaware that that's what it was. So was there any particular event that clicked you over into, I do think this is this dyslexia thing, and I need to go talk to the right department about that now?
Yeah, I remember being approached by the learning support team at school, and this was back when I was still doing GCSEs, and they said, do you want extra time in exams, and do you want all the accommodations that someone with a learning difficulty, which is what they penned at the time, would have? And something did click, but it was still not really resonating. I decided to not take it because I think in hindsight, I think the reason why I probably didn't go down that road was because I still didn't think it was a learning difficulty. I think it was just, I was quite insecure as a child, and I always put the blame on myself for everything. So I thought I'm not servant of any of this. It's actually giving me an advantage, which in fact it was just recognizing that I was underserved and I had a disadvantage among the classroom in terms of kind of how the exam was laid out and how everything was taught. But the one thing that really clicked, I guess, closer to my diagnosis was I really struggled at uni compared to my A-levels. So my A-levels, I just shot up in terms of anyone's expectations. I ended up getting AAC, but predicted grades something like A star, A. And I loved the environment. I loved my subjects. I think the balance of homework was just right, and that I guess catalyzed me into doing quite well in A-levels. So then I guess stupidly thought that uni would be fine. And then I just completely plummeted back to where I was and how I was feeling during GCSE. And I was a little bit older, and I kind of collected my thoughts a little bit. And I thought, okay, I don't think this is just me because I've done really well in my A-levels. This must be something else. And then I started researching, and I thought, okay, I'm really articulate about the experiences that I've had when I was younger. I wonder if they're actually indicative of something bigger. And then I started to do my research about dyslexia, and then I had a screening test. And then the psychologist said that actually there's a very high chance I do have dyslexia, so we'll go ahead and have the assessment. Whilst I was there, I also got diagnosed for dyspraxia.
Oh, yes,
I think it was the way that I walked in, he just thought, I'm going to have to assess you on that as well. I may as well.
And the mind boggles how you walked in there. Something in your step, the way you put everything down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, something must have clicked on that day.
Blimey. So not only do you end up with dyslexia, dyspraxia as well. And now you knew, and you, as you said, things changed for you at that point and freed up a load of extra time. But from what you've already described, you're already doing quite a lot of the key kind of things to help with dyslexia and studying before you found out. So what other interventions come in after that really helped you get workload reduced, I guess, effectively, and able you to free up to do things like fundraising and go out more often?
For me, it was being a lot more productive with my time, and being efficient, but also looking at the different areas which I hadn't exactly neglected, but I just didn't really understand how to help myself. For example, I had a dyslexia coach to go through all of my coursework, and I made sure in final year that I only did coursework. I had a few exams, but I made sure that 80% was coursework, just so I could really focus on getting it right. And so I had a dyslexia coach to go over my sentence structuring, so that spelling, grammar, found out that I was absolutely awful. And I really didn't understand how I'd got that far with just not being able to write properly.
Oh, wow.
So that highlighted that. And then from that, I guess it springboarded me to kind of teach myself the English language a little bit more. So memorize how sentences should be structured, looking at different variations and mediums, and kind of what each lecturer expected depending on the subject. I was also given colour overlays.
Oh, yes.
Which meant that I could read a lot more. But also with that diagnosis, it gave me the confidence to ask for even more accommodations. For example, lecture notes before the lectures. I had extra time during the exams. I had extra time during coursework, and all of that put together made me very productive with my time. And I've never kind of experienced that before, being so productive with my time, that I kind of really took advantage of it. Yes.
Yeah, I imagine it's quite liberating for you once you put all the bits together. And it's a very good point you make with the self-confidence thing, where if you'd spent quite a lot of your early life like, it's just me, I'm just not very good. And then you're like, oh, I'm a dyslexic person, I need these accommodations, but actually do this as well. That's just not me feeling like a stupid or like you're just behind everybody.
Yeah, I guess it's that sense of empowerment in that before I knew I had dyslexia, I was very scared to ask for accommodations because I always felt like I had to fit into a very boxed environment. And I thought if I were to ask for anything outside of that, then I just wouldn't fit in. Which actually, in hindsight, I think if you ask for accommodations and you don't fit in, actually, that's a sign that they're not right for you, as opposed to you're not right for them.
Yes. Yeah. I think you're completely right there. It's up to the people and yourself to work together to work out which accommodations work for you. Like no two dyslexic people are the same, and what works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. So yes, hey, try. I know people who don't like using speech to text programs, and I really like them, but other people really dislike them. So it's really interesting how it all works around like that. Now, obviously, you found out with just a year left at university, and then you would have rolled into the world of work, only being about a year's worth of experience of knowing that you are actually a dyslexic person, and this is what works for you in university. What changed when you hit work? because I've discovered from quite a few people that the accommodations that work at university don't necessarily work when you roll into employment, because it's just a very different environment. How did you find that? As you're still quite new to you at that point.
Yeah, I didn't disclose my dyslexia in the workplace until maybe about a year and a half in. So I was already in my second company outside of uni.
Yeah.
And I never actually disclosed it in a matter of fact way. I think it was in subtle conversation with my manager about it, actually. There was no kind of formal, I have dyslexia, I need these accommodations. It was sort of kind of an afterthought, really. And something that I look back on and think that I could have handled a lot better is I disclosed my dyslexia after I made a mistake at work.
Yes.
I must have made several errors in terms of, I think, project management or spelling. And I thought, okay, now this is the time that I have to say that I'm dyslexic. But there's definitely a better way of disclosing your dyslexia or kind of any neurodiversity. Would not recommend opening up after a mistake, because I think what happened is those negative connotations and the way that I presented it meant that actually me disclosing it didn't give a good impression.
Yes, was that almost, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the other person could almost read between the lines and think that you're using it as an excuse for your mistake? Would that be kind of how it could go down?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely did. But from that, I did get workplace accommodations. I got noise cancelling headphones because we were in an open office. I got access to a dyslexia coach. So to your point earlier around maybe things have shifted, I had someone to converse to and ask actually what accommodations might suit me in the workplace. Because sometimes a workplace assessment can be quite daunting because they can give recommendations, but you don't quite know yourself what works. And sometimes you feel a little bit afraid to actually say if something's not working.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think unlike in a school environment, you really can see, I mean, you can see the financials of things as well, unlike in a school environment. And almost you don't want to show yourself up, I guess, and you don't want to kind of come across like you're being ungrateful or any of those feelings. But it's really powerful to know what support you do need and to say this isn't working, because at the end of the day, it's your career, and actually everyone around you is guided by you. They're not guided by anyone else. Everyone recognizes that neurodiversity is different, and then you have the power. Yeah,
I think so, and it's sometimes tricky because you almost want like a trial period with some of this stuff. Like, get advertised stuff all the time as well, and it's like, I don't know what works for me, but only I know if it will work. But I need to try it all, and I also don't know my blind spots, which is where you alluded to having a coach helps, where they kind of, you're like, well, I'm doing all right at this. And they're like, yeah, but you're frantically typing notes everywhere and using colours and it's very, very, very busy or something along them lines. But did that mean through access to work by any chance?
Yes. Yeah, that was.
Yes. Yeah. But yes, it's really interesting. So going forward from your career at that point, did you always make sure you had the accommodations for access to work in each consecutive job role after that?
I didn't. I know that you can get a workplace assessment with every job role that you have, whether that's within the same organisation, whether that's external. So whenever your job role changes, you can have a new workplace assessment because the environment's changed and you might need different support. I didn't have another workplace assessment after that. The things that we'd gone through in those sessions with the initial supervisor and with the initial dyslexia coach were more around how I can it looks at how I can work in a workplace environment, kind of no matter the intensity, no matter what I was doing. It was very basic things like email management or how to do a presentation, how to make notes. So there were things that were very adaptable to the different workplace settings. So I didn't necessarily feel the need to get a workplace assessment. And I also carried the equipment that I had from the first workplace assessment with me. So the noise cancelling headphones, for example, I still had those. So it wasn't a case of I needed to open up a new workplace assessment to get new technology.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think having the quote unquote sort of life or career skills that help you within your job is really quite useful rather than necessarily being specific to the one job. Like the noise cancelling are really useful in any plan office, even if it's not working from home. It's not a problem where you can just have the noise cancelling headphones chucked to one side. But having the general skills to work as, in your case, in an office environment with the email management or the instant messenger management or all that kind of stuff is really, really useful. Because I see you obviously then started to embrace things because you were the Neurodiversity and Inclusion Board member at Ingram Micro. So that was you really wearing it on your sleeve by that point. How did that come about?
So it came about, so the whole diversity and inclusion conversation at Ingram really came about around the tail end of 2020. Because there was a global need to really look at certain diversity and inclusion issues. The UK set up their own division of, they set up their own committee where people who were interested in diversity and inclusion in the UK office, regardless of what job role or seniority they had, could apply for a role in this committee to discuss certain challenges that we were facing, to maybe look at certain areas that needed bringing up. And that was a really good insight into how diversity and inclusion teams operated and what really we could look at and what we could put into our own hands, really, and bring up. So around about a year into that committee role, we then split out into subsections. So it was looking at different intersectionalities of diversity inclusion, my sector being neurodiversity. So I put across quite a lengthy few bullet points on what exactly I was standing for and what exactly I wanted to implement as well. And I think my passion came through with that because I got that subcommittee leader role, and it was really interesting to kind of speak to HR and speak to the MD and to other kind of heads of the business around the neurodiversity conversation. So that was looking at how our job applications were impacting recruitment. It was looking at the recruitment process to see if it was neurodiverse friendly. It was looking at whether we were incorporating inclusive design, and as much as it was looking at the positives, it was also making sure that we had a safe space for those with neurodiversities who had stories to tell, who were maybe having a bad day because of their neurodiversities, whether that was kind of as someone protruding their insecurities onto them, or whether it was just talking about their own insecurities around being neurodiverse in the workplace. So it was a really interesting role, and it was really where I first kind of learned the benefit of that community.
It does sound like you really, really got stuck into that at that point. And clearly the company itself was really switched on to how neurodiversity could benefit an organisation, how to make the organisation work with neurodiverse people. What sort of things were you doing to sort of drive change at that point? How were you finding the rest of the community was working with you, and were you learning anything from them during that role?
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me was something that I noticed not only in that workplace but across my peer group is the transparency around neurodiversity. So talking about it as a wider issue, but also I knew a lot of people who had neurodiversities and a lot of people who had dyslexia as well, who have dyslexia. And a good number of people said, I guess to summarize, I have dyslexia, but I'm not going to disclose it because I can manage it really well. Like to the point where they kind of managed it out of existence, which I thought, okay, this is an issue actually. I think this is a bit of a red flag, because is it just that your understanding of dyslexia isn't your experience of dyslexia isn't the same as other people's version of dyslexia, or is your understanding of dyslexia, it could be that it's simply just reading and writing, and you think, okay, well, I've got that under control. I can read, I can write. Yes, there's nothing more to it.
Yes,
so it's about unpacking that actually, and kind of inciting that open conversation that I think was a real fundamental things to have.
Yeah, I think so. And I remember sort of when I was doing a lot more sort of, well, I still am learning about dyslexia, but kind of learning how to improve things in my life as a dyslexic person. It's like, so what points of me are me being a dyslexic, and what points are just my personality? And where does it stop in the middle, or does it never stop? Because it's quite easy to go, well, I just can't read, don't write very well, can't spell. But actually there's other things that come in, and particularly with yourself as well, where you've got dyspraxia mixed in as well as dyslexia. So, and other people with ADHD or whatever, it is hard to know. And I think if you're completely blind to it, and I spent years, like well into my 30s, thinking it was just, well, I can't spell and don't like reading. But trying to bring it out of people and having a committee like that where you can, as you say, you manage it out of existence, but actually what else is the problem? And you're also not keeping up with email trains that you think you are, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was in that situation once as well. I mean, when I first got diagnosed, I was kind of a little bit naive to the whole world of dyslexia. So I thought, okay, as soon as I heard those phrases come out of people's mouths, I thought, okay, there's a lot more education that we need to be done, not just for neurotypicals to create an inclusive culture, but to really kind of incite that confidence within people so they're not afraid to speak out about it. Because I think a large part of speaking out about their dyslexia is they don't want to disclose it because other people have their own assumptions about it.
Yes.
And a lot of them can be negative, but there is, when someone doesn't fully embrace their own dyslexia, I think they have no idea what people could be thinking. And I think there is still a negative stereotype around dyslexia and how it affects intelligence, and how, people can't read and people can't write with it.
Yeah.
To the point where I think that people are afraid that if they were to disclose their dyslexia, people will completely change their opinions of that person. They'll instantly think they can't read or write and they're not intelligent, even though they've seen the complete opposite. They've seen that person be intelligent, read, write, be a really valuable member of the team. And I think there's this notion of being an imposter. As soon as you mention that you're dyslexic, the cloak has kind of dropped, and you emerge out of the shadows as someone that people didn't expect.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because despite all the evidence to the contrary, some people's negative assumptions win. And that's terrible, to be honest. Well, hang on. I was the same person I was this morning before I told you, and you were fine with my written work then. Why have you suddenly jumped on top of it all?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's, there are definitely some cases where people do kind of switch. They change their impression and they switch their assumption. But there are also people out there who, if they were to have one of their colleagues, their peers, someone in their team open up about their dyslexia, it actually changes that mindset. Because there are people out there that actually take things at face value, and they come to question and say, okay, well, you've just disclosed that you're dyslexic. This is what I thought was dyslexia. You clearly aren't that stereotype. No. So I'm just going to completely reduce my negative stereotype and actually replace it with what I see in front of me.
Yes. The people are open-minded and are willing to have their assumptions challenged. And it is really great when you meet people like that. Like, hang on, you don't fit what I thought. Let me go rethink this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really positive. I have got a few phrases like, "Oh, but you don't look dyslexic," or I would have never thought you were dyslexic because I thought they couldn't read. And it's just strange. In that moment, I think, certain times I've not really known what to say. But I think it's a compliment, but I don't know.
I know what you mean. Yeah, the I don't look like, you don't look like a dyslexic is quite a funny one because...
what does a dyslexic person look like? Can you see into my brain? Can you tell that it's wired differently? Have you got X-ray?
Is it like something in the eyes or something?
Crazy eyes.
Yeah. Every time you get a book, your eyes just go shut or something. I don't know. That does make me laugh, that one. It's kind of funny. But you sort of shifted again into working into freelance after you're working for other people. Would you say that was pushed by how that particular industry you work in works, or do you think it also helps you with your neurodiversity and making life work for how your brain works?
I think I can look at it in two ways. There was the adapting my work style to suit my neurodiversity, but I've always said that I wanted to own my own business and go freelance. I said after uni that I'm going to spend 2 years in the industry, in the corporate world, to really learn some experience. COVID hit. And from then I thought, okay, I really need to reevaluate. And I was in this position where I thought, I need some more experience. I need to climb the ladder a bit more. But through that time in corporate, I actually realized that it's just not working with how my brain works. With all the accommodations that I had and the ability to adapt my own schedule and to have that flexibility and to really kind of take ownership of my work, I still felt like there was something missing. And that's when I decided to go freelance. I thought, okay, it's been long enough now since COVID. I'm just going to go for it. I've got quite a good community over on Instagram with girls with dyslexia. And I want some free time to really build that up because I was really struggling working full time, adding on the freelance on top of that, but also working on girls with dyslexia. So reducing the number of hours that I simply work in general has really helped. I can kind of take breaks when I want. I can park things whenever I want. I can have meetings whenever I want, and I can really have my schedule in my own hands. And I think when corporations say that they going to encourage flexible working, it's not really flexible working in its entirety. I still feel like there's a level of flexibility that you can have between the hours of 8 till 6. But aside from that, it's not completely flexible to the point where, no, I don't want to be working on a Saturday morning for a company that I'm prorated at. I would rather much work for myself and work whenever I want, because ultimately it's down to me alone to push that forward.
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean. And I work for a company that has people all over the world, so you kind of get that effect of people not working, so we say, office hours. And you're getting messages from somebody at 9 o'clock at night is interesting. And then they get it back from you at whenever in the morning. It's kind of, there's that sort of collaboration thing is tricky, but I think when you're working for yourself, you can kind of almost like Saturday morning sometimes is a good time to work because nobody else is awake yet and they're having a lie-in and you're sat there working on your business kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think what I've learned, I mean, I've only been freelance for about 3.5 weeks at the moment, but I've really learned how well I work at different times of the day.
Interesting.
Which is really kind of thrown me actually, and it's made me really adapt my schedule to the point where I'm not feeling guilty about maybe having a slight lie-in and jumping onto my laptop at 10, or I don't feel guilty about sitting on my laptop until 7, 8 in the evening, because I think, okay, well, I've had all that time in the day to do things, and I really feel comfortable with that flexibility.
Yeah, I could see that. And how are you finding the discipline with that? Does your mind wander, or have you really kind of got it tied down to what hours work for you now?
Still a work in progress. Haven't really figured it out, but the good thing about it is, because I'm working, I shouldn't say I'm working fewer hours. I'm probably working the same amount, but it's just split up into completely different things.
Right, yes.
And I almost find respite in turning my productive mind to something else. And sometimes winding down isn't just sitting in front of the TV. It's actually moving your focus to something else that's actually just as productive, but it's completely different.
Yes. I find that too, actually. Sometimes I'll swap from my day job into maybe doing some editing or doing something else. It's like, I'm still working here, but it's just that mental, it's like it shifts a different lane in your brain and still feels like you're winding down or not working. Haven't tried that bit of the brain yet, I guess. So clearly, you're taking that job to grow girls with dyslexia. So let's move on to that. Now, where did the spark of that come from?
It came from, I had disclosed my dyslexia in the workplace. I was starting to see, even though I got the assistive technology around my dyslexia, and I was starting to be a little bit more open about my dyslexia, I still realized that actually there's a gap. There's gaps in people's understanding of dyslexia. And actually those gaps in education can be quite dangerous if applied in the wrong sort of way.
Okay.
For example, I found that a workplace assessment in itself was getting confused with a performance improvement plan, which is very dangerous to get confused.
Yeah, what the hell?
I also found that there was a lot more education needed for managers managing people with dyslexia, and oftentimes what you can get to challenge that is, but I'm neurotypical, I don't have dyslexia, it's fine, I know how to manage it. You can manage yourself, you've got assistive technology. When in actual fact, having a neurodiversity is a two-way relationship. It's not solely down to the person to make sure that they are fully adaptive in that environment and feel included. It's actually the responsibility of every single person in that environment to really understand. Because if I'm surrounded by people, and I'm not saying that I necessarily was, but if I was surrounded by people that didn't understand dyslexia, who weren't going to educate themselves around dyslexia, yes, I could build up the research for myself and really understand what support I needed, but then actually in a organizational structure that depends on everyone kind of bringing each other up, I'd automatically be left behind because of that kind of pack mentality.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I can see what you mean. So Yeah, imagine getting an assessment mixed up with a performance plan.
Yeah, I think that really kind of sparked things, and I thought, okay, like there is a bigger gap than I thought when it comes to understanding dyslexia. And I thought, okay, if I'm, and it made me feel very insecure. It made me feel unheard. And it made me feel quite isolated. And I thought, okay, if I'm feeling this, there are other people feeling this. And I was thinking about different intersectionalities as well with that. And the misogyny that goes on in the workplace against women is also impactful as well. So not only were there people in the workplace that thought I was less intelligent because I had dyslexia, the fact that I was also a woman didn't work in my favor. So the two kind of combined and exacerbated the whole situation.
Yes, that's not good, is it? The double hit of misunderstanding your neurodiversity and also misunderstanding what you bring as a female to the workplace is not good.
Yeah, I think Succeed with Dyslexia coined it as the double disadvantage.
Do they? Okay. Yeah. I did see they wrote an article a while back on the divide between being statemented as a boy versus a girl from a young age. There's a divide there, and potentially females are better at masking it to that point. So how did girls with dyslexia start? Was that kind of something on Instagram or LinkedIn, or how did you kind of kick it off in the first place?
It was Instagram, and it was very sporadic. I've been sitting on building up something for a few months, but I kind of bit the bullet in it was just over a year and a half ago. So I believe it was 2020 in February, March time, and it was a Sunday. And I just thought, okay, I'd had a glass of wine, and I thought, I'm just going to start it. What can happen? And I was overthinking it. I was majorly overthinking it, actually. I thought, okay, I've got to get everything right. I've got to build up a business. I've got to have a business account before I have an Instagram page. And I just thought, okay, Armelle, you're overthinking. Just set up the page. I bought a Canva account for myself, and I did one post. And it was what to consider when your partner has dyslexia. And that was my first post. And I remember it getting 40 to 50 likes. And I thought, okay, that's good enough for me. I thought, okay, that's a lot of likes. Because on my personal account, I was maybe getting about 20. And I thought, okay, I've got double already. This is good. And it just kind of snowballed from there. It was kind of a mixture of, as I mentioned before, providing education and awareness around dyslexia so people could feel a lot more comfortable talking about it. But it was, I guess, in the same breath, it was almost kind of cathartic for me as well, because I was still going through those insecurities and overthinking things. And I kind of needed to reiterate things for myself, and it was quite therapeutic. So I really felt instantly part of the community. I feel like I was building the community around me rather than kind of above or beneath me.
And did it keep sort of ramping up from there in terms of getting growth on Instagram? Ramping up from there. I just posted posts on Instagram, and that was it. I think I'd opened a Twitter, but I kind of neglected that a bit. And I was just posting maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And I think within the first 3 weeks, I generated about 500 followers. So I thought, okay, something that I'm doing is resonating. And I knew that I had started to build a community for the people that I really want to target when I started. I started gaining followers outside of the dyslexia focused accounts.
So I was getting some visibility from dyslexia accounts in kind of England, Scotland, Canada, America, but there were other people trying to do the same thing. And maybe about 2 months down the line, I started realizing that actually there were just normal people following me because they found my account really useful for them. So it was less of a business connection and more of a, I'm going to follow this person because I find their content valuable for whatever reason. And then it snowballed from there. And then, of course, the more followers that you get on social media, the more visible that you become. And I thought, I'm going to move my content that I post on LinkedIn away from marketing and solely go to dyslexia, because actually, if it's working on Instagram and it's work focused, it's definitely going to resonate somehow on LinkedIn.
Oh, yes. So I imagine it would. Well, it did. I've had a look at how many people follow you on LinkedIn and how many of your posts are clearly successful there. One of the things I really enjoy when sort of coming across your content, particularly on LinkedIn, is all the infographics. Is that something you put together yourself? Is that kind of your creative side in marketing? And I really enjoy them. I think the first one I saw was the iceberg one with what it's like to be a dyslexic person, how you could, the small bits above it and then all the stuff underneath. So, wow. And I really enjoy taking information in like that. So give me an infographic on anything and I'm going to read it. So how did that kind of come about? And would you be able to talk us through the iceberg infographic a little bit more?
Yeah, so I do everything myself. I've had people saying that, they think they've got a team behind me, and I'm thinking, I'm just one person on a Canva account, just doing things sporadically. The dyslexia iceberg came about because up until that point, I've really been focusing on text-heavy posts, but I'd been making it more dyslexia friendly, so making sure that it wasn't on white or black kind of contrast backgrounds, making sure that there was little text per page, making sure that there were like bite-sized chunks. But then I thought, okay, I've kind of exhausted a lot of the text-heavy things, mainly because I thought, as much as I enjoyed doing it, I also think visually. Yes. So again, it's going back to kind of what I find therapeutic and what I think if I can understand it, then anyone can understand it. And I thought, okay, how can I visualize the fundamental things that I've been looking at in a really bite-sized way? Because I realized the pattern in what I was creating was actually the really basic, simplistic things around what dyslexia is and how it corresponds to other neurodiversities, and kind of the real basics that as dyslexics, I guess we're versed to a certain degree in our own dyslexia, but we really have to start from the beginning in terms of what's really helpful. And actually, it's the really basic things. So I thought, okay, how can I visualize this in a really basic way that people understand? And the iceberg image is something that is kind of sort of presented to us even in primary school, to kind of visualize kind of what's underneath. Yes. And I started with that, and I thought, actually, I need to go right to the beginning and say, this is what people still think dyslexia is, just reading and writing. Yeah. I wasn't trying to say that it wasn't, but this is also what dyslexia is. What we're looking at when we unpack reading and writing challenges, for example, the word recall, the sentence structuring, the visual thinking, but also what comes about because of that. So that's the social anxiety, that's even literal interpretations of things because of our understanding of language, and the afflictions in what people say that can be quite difficult to kind of interpret and to understand. And it's all of those different elements that actually create this perception of what reading and writing challenges are. And I think they differ. So if you were to talk to a fellow dyslexic and say, what are your reading and writing challenges? They will depict all of those little minute details that make up reading and writing. Whereas someone who isn't quite as versed in dyslexia or neurotypical would say something like, oh, not being able to read, not being able to write. And you think, okay, but there's a lot more to that.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And it is, as I said before, with like in the infographics, it's a really nice way of putting it out and actually understanding the nuances with all the iceberg and what these things mean. I think really helps not only sort of neurotypical people understand, but also shifts the language that dyslexics kind of, because you can read all the things at the bottom of the iceberg and like some don't apply to me, but it's like, but that must apply to somebody else. And it's nice to know there's more people out there and they all have different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a good way to look at it is, I guess in the grand scheme of things, everyone is neurodiverse because no brain is exactly the same. It's just that our brains slightly differ more from the norm. Yes. So if you look at, two people, they're not going to have the exact same traits and personalities. And that's exactly the same for neurodiversities and dyslexia. Like no two people with dyslexia are the same.
Yes, I think so. I think it'd be interesting to see how much deviation from the mean you need before you're classed as dyslexic and how big the mean is for neurotypical people. How are you finding your audience when it's growing? Because obviously your demographic or your focus is women who are dyslexic, but I read your content and I find it really interesting. Are you finding as you grow that your audience is still sticking very much with females, or is it sort of drifting into more general?
Yeah, it's pretty much still 93% women. But a part of why I decided to call it Girls with Dyslexia is because I was initially talking about my own lived experience as a woman with dyslexia. So, there are, I guess it's the nuances of people with dyslexia. I come across situations and scenarios that someone else might not come across with dyslexia, or if they were a different gender, because they come across different, I guess, life hurdles and challenges and experiences. So for me, it was, I guess, putting across my experience, and I am a woman. But yeah, my audience is pretty much 93% girls and women. I have had a few comments, and I say a few because it's really only been a handful on TikTok and Instagram that say, you're leaving men out. It's completely exclusive. It's a club. And I think it's, I have one comment actually. I explained that, saying that, it's my lived experience and we're focusing on women, but it's not solely women. You can interact and enjoy the content because most of it is targeted to dyslexia. And then the reply that I got to that specific comment was, "Oh, I was only joking." And I thought, "Oh, okay. Were you though?" I think, you saw me come back with quite a serious reply, and quite a kind reply actually. And you probably thought, "Okay, I've got to backtrack." But there was another comment that I got about, why do you only focus on women and not men? And I replied to it. And he said something like, well, if you're going to reply like that, then I'm not going to follow you. And I thought, well, okay, well, fair enough.
The thing is, yes, your account is obviously your lived experience and called Girls with Dyslexia, but at the end of the day, good advice is good advice. Whether what the account name is or who the person is that it's coming from, if it's good advice and helps, then why should it matter? Like what?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really indicative of them putting something in a pigeonhole as opposed to me, because I'm not saying, this is a solely a girls and women community and men aren't allowed. So I think I think it's very indicative of maybe how they see things. Yeah. Which is, and I think I'm not going to change where I niche because of a few comments. Yeah, we see it across the board in all industries. Women are generally in all industries underserved. So you've got women in tech, women who code. We need that safe space for women and girls to really talk about their experiences of being a woman and being a girl with dyslexia.
Yeah, and I think you are clearly providing that safe space, but it's not an excluded place, is it, where you're just ring fencing in there? Because I'm sure you don't scroll through all the people that follow you and back people off.
Oh no, definitely not. And I think my stats kind of see that I don't, because 93% or so are female women or girls. So it kind of speaks for itself, really.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a great platform, and I think one that's needed. Having read a few articles myself on bits and pieces, it clearly needs a platform that women and girls can go to where it's a safe space to talk about their own experience, and particularly with all the other history behind being, particularly as you cited in the workplace as a woman, it is a different experience, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
That brings me towards the end of the episode, and what I like to round the podcast out with is 3 rapid fire questions. They're quick questions from me, but they don't necessarily need quick answers from you. So first question is, what prejudice have you had about dyslexia that has been proven wrong?
For me, it's been the intelligence side.
Yes.
So being in school undiagnosed, I've had teachers, kind of 2 schools of thought with that. It's been you don't apply yourself, or it's been you're not intelligent, basically. And that's an insecurity that I probably still carry. It's not as present as it was, but if I disclose my dyslexia to someone, I do still think at the back of my mind, is their impression of me going to change? So that's the one thing.
Yes, yeah. Hopefully your lived experience is showing that the impression of you is not changing. Or if it is, then maybe you don't need to spend so much time with them. Okay, so second question. If an alien landed and asked you what dyslexia was, how would you explain it to them?
I would simply say it's a way of thinking differently. Everyone's brain is different, but then a dyslexic brain is structured in a way that means that we think in a different way because we think in a different part of the brain. Our neurological makeup is different, and that brings strengths. But it also, in some ways, disables us in a neurotypical world.
Okay. Great answer. Okay, and the final serious question for me on the podcast, seeing as this is called the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show, what is your favourite dyslexia life hack?
Oh, that's a tricky one. What I would say to that is there's such a big power in community that you don't even realise until you step in. It's often seen to someone with dyslexia as quite an isolating challenge within yourself, especially if you're late diagnosed. But then simply being open about your dyslexia with other dyslexics or with your friends who may or may not be dyslexic, there's a lot of power in being transparent about your dyslexia, but also finding community with other dyslexics. So you start to reduce the challenges that you have and start to really find confidence in it. And one of my friends who I found out was dyslexic a few years ago, she, I believe, made a dyslexic mistake, or I asked her, how are you so relaxed almost in the workplace about your dyslexia? And she simply goes, you've just got to have a laugh sometimes. And that made me think, if I can't laugh about it, then everyone else in the room is going to be kind of stifled by it, and it's going to be an even more treacherous subject to breach. So it's finding light in being dyslexic. It's embracing the good times. It's also kind of laughing at the mistakes that we make. And ultimately, I think the more we encourage that, the more we will start to disenfranchise that feeling of linking with intelligence.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. And so sometimes just having a sense of humour gets us through all sorts of things, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I force myself in certain scenarios to laugh at things that I've done. And actually, it's kind of almost rewired my brain to not feel so guilty about making that mistake. So then I actually don't care as much about what other people think about it, because I'm okay with it.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's really cool. Nice hack. Okay, before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to add, and where can people find you?
Yes. So I have my social media accounts. So that's at Girls with Dyslexia on Instagram. It's Girls W Dyslexia on Twitter, and simply Girls with Dyslexia on TikTok. I'm also on LinkedIn, so happy to connect. I post a lot about my dyslexia journey and kind of life hacks on there.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.